Hello, hello. Welcome everyone to another town hall with the Black Community Ambassadors Program. I'm Elizabeth Joy, Director of Black Community Ambassadors Support Program, and with me is Kimberly Braswell, who will be your moderator this evening. Hopefully you joined us last week. If not, we'll give you a recap of part one, and Kimberly will give you an update as to what we'll be doing tonight. Just want to welcome everyone again. Hopefully you are taking care as we continue to manage a very difficult time. For those of you who are just connecting with us for the first time, the Black Community Ambassador Support Program was launched earlier this year in response to a need that we saw for Black helpers to turn the love and support they give to others inward on themselves. And so we've been doing support groups, learning communities, and different things to just help Black helpers find a way to support themselves during difficult times. We want to thank the ADAMH of Franklin County for their funding for our program, as well as Mental Health America of Ohio, who is supporting us by hosting our program within their organization. And we also want to thank all of you who are doing the amazing work of supporting our community, especially the Black community, as we continue to battle racism, oppression, and all finding our way during a very difficult health and financial pandemic. Kimberly, thanks so much for agreeing to host us and moderate for us again tonight. I will let you take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you to the amazing Elizabeth Joy, who is not wearing her traditional trademark teal and still looking ever lovely in the purple.
Thank you, Kim.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So what we're going to do is, if you were not tuning in with us last week, we actually decided in doing this conversation about Black mental wellness, we wanted to offer you all different kinds of perspectives of the ways that we get well. And one of the things we wanted to do was invite one of our community members, community leaders who does somatic practices to kind of start us off as a grounding exercise to get us all in the same place. Because if I know us, we're doing all kinds of things. Somebody snatching up some kids. Somebody might be grilling a rack of ribs somewhere. I don't know. Folks might be driving or whatever. But in all of that, we want to make sure that even if our bodies are doing different things, can we ground ourselves and kind of somehow get in one mindset, one vibe? So before we jump into all of the juiciness of today's conversation, I want to welcome Malik Willoughby from Mbube Institute to ground us. Thanks, Malik, for joining us.
Thank you for welcoming me, Kim. And it's a pleasure to be here. If you will, if you can find a comfortable space wherever you are in the space that you're in, and hopefully you're in a nice, safe space. Being in a nice, safe space, if you're seated, try to sit tall through your spine. As you sit tall through your spine, take your time and inhale, bring your shoulders up to your ears. Exhale, roll your shoulders back and down, let them glide down your spine. Meditation, as we know, there's so many definitions and some of them don't sound so sexy. However, I want you to think about it as retraining your attention. So you want to find a focal point, but you want to find this focal point in a way that isn't analytical. So in a nice non-analytical way, find something to focus on. And as you look inward for a moment, if you feel safe, and only if you feel safe, close your eyes where you are. And if you don't want to close your eyes, just lower your gaze. Lower your gaze so that just in front of you is all that you have. Think of taking a step inside, if you will. So I want you to invite this kind of acceptance. Take your time. If you're seated, plant both feet on the floor. If there's a back to your chair, go ahead. As you sit tall, you can even put your back to the chair. Let's find our breath. So as you find your breath, let's exhale. 3, 2, 1. Breathe in nice and deep. In through the nose. Exhale out the nose. And again, breathe in deep. In through the nose. Exhaling out the nose again. Let's try that one more time, breathing in. And out. So as you do that on your own a couple of times, just allow each breath to bring you calm. And so relax. Continue to breathe calmly at whatever pace is comfortable for you. So in this moment, I want you to notice. I just want you to take your time as we embody the presence of acceptance. We're going to practice a body scan. So I want you to begin by not moving your eyes around with this body scan, but just imagine every time we go to a region or a center of your body, being there. If you begin to drift, or if your mind begins to wander, come back to me. Come back to the sound of my voice. And most importantly, rediscover your breath. Breath is life. Rest in the natural flow of your breath. And begin to feel your body and mind as it settles. So place your attention now at the top of your head. And without looking for anything in particular, feel the sensations there. Then letting your attention move down, feel the sensations on the back of your head, on either side of your head, in your ears, your forehead, the seat of your third eye. Traveling with your mind only to your eyes, to your nose, to your cheeks, into your jaw. As you travel, be as slow and intentional and thorough as you like. As you continue the scan, be careful not to use your eyes to direct your attention. Scan with your whole self. Take your eyes out of the picture so that you can make sure you alleviate any tension. As you take your time, rather connect directly with all of those sensations. Feel your body from within your body. In certain parts of the body, it's common to feel some numbness, or for there to be no noticeable sensations, and that's fine. It's like when you ask a question to the universe and you don't hear anything, then you received your answer. Sometimes it comes in silence. Let your attention remain in those areas for a few moments. In a relaxed and an easy way, you may find that as your attention deepens, you become increasingly aware of sensations. Images or thoughts will naturally arise. That is your mind doing what it does best. But as those thoughts come into view, reach for them just like a cloud. As if they're there, allow them to pass as if they were never there. Allow them to pass gently, and then return your attention back to the sensations of your body. Let your intention be to release all ideas and experience your physical and aliveness exactly as it is. Not what you want it to be, not what it was. Feel, notice everything in this moment. With a relaxed, open awareness, begin a gradual and thorough scan of the rest of your body. Place your attention on the area of your neck and throat, and those intentions that come from there, and noticing without judging whatever sensations you feel. Then let your attention move to your shoulders and slowly down your arms, feeling the sensations and aliveness there, and into your hands. Feel each finger from the inside, the palms, the backs of your hands, noticing tingling, pulsing, pressure, warmth, or cold. Slowly move on to explore the sensations down to your chest. Bring your awareness to your upper back and shoulders and throughout your torso. And continuing to let the awareness sweep down the body, feel the sensations that arise in your hips, in your lower region. Move slowly down through the legs, feeling them through and through, down to your feet and toes. Feel the sensations of contact, pressure, temperature, in the places where your body touches the chair or the cushion or the floor or the wall. Now expand your attention to include your entire body in a comprehensive way. Allow it to relax. Be aware of the body as a field of changing sensations, knowing that we are in process. We are never a structure. Every cell changes. Every dynamic energy field ebbs, flows. As you rest in awareness of your whole body, if particular sensations call your attention, bring a soft and allowing attention to them. Don't try to manage it or manipulate it. as you begin to pay particular attention to the difference between being inside thoughts, I want you to begin to travel outside to reawaken, bringing your awareness back to the space that you're in, to the immediate experience of sensations. The body scan can be repeated anytime during a single meditation sitting or throughout your daily life. As you return your awareness back to the space that you're in, slight sensations that you feel, be intentional as you move slightly, whether it's your fingers, whether it's your toes. Inhale and draw those shoulders all the way back up to your ears. Exhale and roll them down and back. And when you feel ready, if your eyes are closed, open them. Thank you.
All right. So first of all, thank you so much, Malik. Y'all better not have fallen asleep. I know you were supposed to be scanning your bodies, not falling asleep. So hopefully you're still awake. And if you are, I'm going to now welcome the rest of our panelists today. Joining Malik Willoughby is going to be Dr. Joe Jackson, and we also have Kenneth Jackson. We got two Jacksons, y'all, in the house today. And I also want to say shout out to someone who you might have seen on the advertisement, who is right now, he's healing. So we got to take care of our healing processes. And I want to give a huge thanks to Kenneth Jackson, who in the clutch, family, in the clutch came through and was like, I got you. Let's talk about it. Let's go get this healing as a Black community. So we're back. We're back, family. And as you know, we're talking to the whole Black community, but especially the Black healers. Those of you who are the ones whose phones are blowing up, you're also always answering calls. You got people who want you to get in touch with them. They're taking you to the grocery. You're taking them to the grocery store, whatever, however you're showing up for people. You do it all. You may not have a whole bunch of people checking in on you, but this is our check-in for you to let you know we're here. We care about you, and we want to make sure you're doing your wellness check-ins. So we started this conversation actually last week, and it was about mental wellness. We started with the fear of labels, right? With mental health and mood disorders, diagnoses. What happens when it's not just a bad day, when it's more than that, when it might be anxiety, it might be depression, maybe it's post-traumatic stress disorder, maybe it's all different kinds of things. And we talked about what it means when you actually say, this might be something more than just I'm having trouble getting out of bed. Maybe I should go talk to somebody. What does that process feel like? What does it mean when I'm in the therapy session and I feel like I'm scared to release? I feel like I'm scared to talk about the emotions that I'm feeling. What does it mean then if that therapist says, I think we've got something going on and there is a label? How do you receive that label? We talked about that. We talked about what it means if the therapist says, for your treatment, one of the things I want to give you are maybe some medications to help you in this moment right now. And so we had Dr. Eric Currens. Shout out to Dr. Eric Currens and family. We love you. And we had, he talked about the clinical process of that journey. Then we had Dr. Joe Jackson, who's here with us to talk about the medications, how it metabolizes in our bodies. We're going to talk about that a lot more today. And then we also talked about somatic practices for those of us who are saying, well, what else can I do? And how do all of these things work together? We had Malik talk with us about what does it look like when I'm paying attention to my body? What is my body telling me when it's anxious, when it's heavy? What's going on with me? How do I work all these things out? And how does the whole work together? And again, I will note to you out there in YouTube world and Facebook world family, guess what? For all of us who say there's this taboo about Black mental health, and especially regarding Black men, and how many of us have not heard about Black men getting bashed like, y'all need to go to therapy. You need to do. Well, guess what? Again, second week in a row, I will say, guess who's on the call? Black men talking about us getting well. So let's jump into it, family. Malik, Kenneth, Gerald, what brings you to this topic? How are you connected to this topic? On today, we're talking about self-medicating, right? And that means addiction and recovery, the ways we use coping skills. And also for those of us who are listening out there, our natural inclination is to go to drugs and alcohol, but there are so many different ways that we can be addicted, right? We can be addicted to sex, to food, to exercise, to gambling, all kinds of things. But we really want to talk about the behavioral pattern of coping strategies when it goes too far, when it becomes addiction, and then how do we get well if it does? So, hey family, Malik, Kenneth, Jared, how do you get to this space? Talk to me about this work. Now, this one gets particularly messy and challenging because we've got all kinds of things going on. How did you get to this space, this moment? Talk to me. Oh, and let's do like we did last week. Whoever goes first, call on your friend to go next. Go ahead and come off mute, Kenneth.
Well, I'll start off the conversation on the topic of self-medicating. Thanks for having me here. I really appreciate this opportunity and to help the Black community and whoever's listening and tuned in. So first off, I want to say how people get to self-medicating is feelings, emotions, thoughts, most often reared in maybe a childhood trauma or events that have happened that are bringing on some type of depression, making people feel a certain type of way. Could be peer pressure, could be abuse, could be lots of things that people go through in their home environment, could be other environments. But kind of the trauma and abuse, people will suppress those feelings and those memories, and they will pop back up from time to time, and people understand how to deal with it. So when people are feeling a certain way and they don't like the way they're feeling, their body is giving them signals and telling them they don't like the way they're feeling. And they need them to do something to take them out of that feeling. So what people are doing, they're trying to escape a feeling, and they're trying to use something to cover up that feeling or to get out of that feeling. Maybe in a moment, maybe longer term. But as people grow up and, into that great big world out here, they tend to gravitate towards drugs, alcohol, things like that, because they know it's going to give them some relief short term from the feelings.
And Kenneth, can you also share, based on this topic, how did you come to have or choose a career in this space? This is a pretty challenging kind of career to have. Can you share with our friends listening out there exactly what you do and why you chose this line of work?
Yes, well, I'm a social worker and a chemical dependency counselor. And I chose this line of work basically because I had alcoholism running my family. My dad was alcoholic. My grandfather was alcoholic. So, that's what I grew up around. So I started drinking at a young age. It just kind of spiraled out of control as I got older. And so I needed help. So I tried to do it on my own. I didn't know how. I just was trying different things that, really didn't make sense. But it made sense to me at the time until I found out about where I could get help and how I could get help and who could help me. So that kind of dressed up my spirit to want to give back and help others, who are going through the same thing or have been through the same thing and that are struggling, with everyday life, trying to cope with those feelings and those addictions and, that are out there self-medicating. So this is my, calling, I think, to give back and to help people who are going through the same things that I've been through in my life.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Kenneth. Who would you like to go next in your esteemed panelists?
Looks like Dr. Gerald is over there waiting patiently.
He wasn't he? All right, go ahead and share what you got to say, how you came into this space with this topic, Dr. Gerald Jackson.
All right, well, it's only appropriate that another Jackson pass the torch to another Jackson, so sorry, Malik. But anyway, a whole lot of things have happened in my life to get me to this point. I've really had an addiction to being happy, but I always haven't seen happy things, haven't always been in happy situations, but my mind and my spirit has always been one that's of empathy for others. And with having an empathetic spirit, a lot of people share their stories with you. And at an early age, I felt like that's what happened in my life. From an early age, a lot of people just shared a lot of feelings with me, whether it be feelings of joy or feelings of sadness or feelings of just, mediocrity in life or just feelings of ambition. So I've been blessed in a way to have that type of spirit. So it kind of propelled me to just always have this spirit of trying to be happy and always showing empathy towards others. From early on in my life, I worked at Grant Medical Center. I was a transportation guy. I took people to and from their hospital room to whether they were having an x-ray or something of that nature. And I got to hear those people's stories because I tried to, my energy was an energy or a spirit of empathy. Hi, how are you? Introducing myself. And they would always share a lot of different things. So I had a lot of ambition myself. I really wanted to be a psychiatrist. I wanted to be an MD. Before I became a pharmacist, I was studying to take the MCAT. I really wanted to understand the mind in every way that I could. And I think what drove me to really want to understand the mind is I had a mother at the age of 18 who I found was who passed away from a seizure. And so from very early on in my life, in terms of my professional life and going to college, I had a desire to learn about neurology and what makes the brain work the way it does. What could cause someone to have a seizure? What potentially could cause someone ultimately die from a seizure? So I think that's the origin of how I'm here and able to talk to you today. So along that path of losing someone as important as your mother, you self-medicate in a lot of ways. We're going to hear someone later on tonight talk a little bit about self-medication. And, at a 19-year-old who just lost his mother, had two other sisters, had a father who was very involved in my life, but, he was very busy himself. I found different ways to medicate, and I had friends at the time. It was the 90s. So what did you do to self-medicate? You turned to marijuana. So early on in my life, at around 19 years old, I experimented a little bit with marijuana. It was a way of self-medicating, and it wasn't the right way of going about my life, but it is something I'm willing to offer and share to you because it was something that I turned to. Now, I'm not encouraging anyone to turn to recreational drug use, even as something as well accepted as marijuana today, because it does alter your mind. It alters biochemistry. And as long as you are going into a situation understanding that, then maybe it will be acceptable for you. But I'll tell you right now, the first time I started smoking marijuana, I had no idea what I was doing. And it altered me in a way where I felt very relaxed, and we laughed and we had a good time. But there were often times that we would potentially buy marijuana that just left me blank. And, where I wasn't able to be myself and wasn't able to have full control of my surroundings, maybe even shouldn't have even been behind the wheel of a car. So self-medication is something that I understand very well. And not that I get everything right today, but my way of self-medicating turned to more of feeding my mind, feeding my body, feeding my soul. And I turned away from drugs and alcohol. That doesn't mean I don't drink a glass of wine every now and then. I love a good Cabernet or red blend, but there's a level of restraint that everyone must learn to use. And only you can decide that restraint. And sometimes family members can tell you when you're not showing restraint and maybe you should listen. So I had a lot of good people around me. I played a lot of sports. I've had a lot of good coaches. I've matured. It took me about 28 years of age to start to really become a man and mature in a way that a man needed to mature. That came with reading books, maybe having some failed relationships. And I stand before you today, a man that's still being molded and shaped into someone that's going to be productive in society, that has political aspirations potentially as well. But I'm still a work in progress. So for everyone who's under the sound of my voice today, I just would encourage you to listen. You got some really people that really want you to understand and get something, extract something from tonight's message. You may not walk away an encyclopedia of everything we discussed tonight, but it's that one or two things that maybe you'll be able to understand and recall that's going to help maybe change a decision you might make that wouldn't have been a healthy decision for you or your family.
Thanks so much, Gerald. Malik Willoughby, not a Jackson, yes. But we accept Willoughbys in this space as well. We do.
I'll be an adopted Jackson tonight, guys. Jackson 3. As far as my story, it's a long one. However, the short of it is seeing my father and everyone, and seeing my forefathers and foremothers in their struggles, and pretty much like Dr. G Jackson. I will say that we have similar histories in that, perhaps not complete parallel lives, but I will say that being empathetic, I've been approached ever since I was a child with regard to people who wanted to share their stories and share their stories generally, all the secrets that they couldn't share with others. And usually those things are shrouded in traumas. But what brought me here in this pathway, I want to say, was a cycle of trauma, I should say. And interestingly enough, even this conversation tonight, we ended up in Columbus, Ohio, as a result of trying to get away from my father when he became very abusive, and everything changed for him when he was dealing with substance. And so the very short and charismatic man became abusive. He became someone we didn't know. And I was always surrounded by substance, and it made a lot of sense because of the escape, wanting to escape our realities back then only made sense. And because we could never take a vacation, we could always take a short vacation. If we puff pass, we could always take a short vacation. We could afford those things. My father, he dealt with heroin when he was very, very young because he hung with jazz cats. And he, through every era, including the crack era, he dealt with all of the substances. And I watched how destructive it was in our family. And being in this work and being semi-sane, I practice a lot of somatic work. And because of that, not knowing what I was doing, but leading me to a pathway is what led me to this work.
Thank you all so much for sharing your stories. I think it's important for us to know the personal connection to this. And I'm a person who has addiction through my grandfather, right? So my mother's father was an alcoholic, and we never even met him. He was murdered when she was 5. We'll never know if it was linked to his drinking or not. It was a heroic thing that he did, but he was interrupting a domestic dispute, and he was shot during that process. But one of the stories that she tells, like, we have these amazing stories of my grandfather. Oh, he did these things, and he was a doctor, and he was a veteran, and all these kinds of things. But he also, the other stories that we hear is that he was a functioning alcoholic, and he had really important work that he did in community. And he also went through a tremendous amount of trauma, integrating medical schools and things like that, and seeing things that no one should see in war. And so with that, he self-medicated, and we know that these are part of our stories. There were 2 things that I heard that I really want to lift up and have us talk about. And one of the first things I'm going to ask y'all to process as panelists, there was a word that you used, Malik, that I want to have us think about. You used the word escape, that we are looking for an escape from things that we see, feel, experience in the Black community. And I want us to take a second just for, just setting the stage so that we have a different way for all of us to belong to this topic. What are the ways that we have seen in all of your lenses as human beings, as friends, as brothers, as family members, as helpers in the community? What are the things that we get addicted to when we are escaping from a lot of the heaviness of our lives? What do we escape to? What do we use? What are the different things that you find that in the Black community we're addicted to? As an example, and I'll start, I know that I've seen in organizer spaces, I've seen a lot of smokers, so cigarette smokers. I've seen heavy use of marijuana. I've seen drinking, a lot of heavy use of drinking. And in some cases, not that I've seen it, but I hear a lot about also the use of cocaine and the use of weed mixed with fentanyl. So I know in some bases where people need to be up and they're strategizing and they're trying to not feel the heaviness of the work that they're doing, but they're trying to help so many people and they want to keep going, but they got to go to sleep, but then they got to be awake for these things. And they're using different things to mitigate the heaviness, prescription meds, things like that. What are you finding? What are you seeing regarding what we are addicted to? Whoever would like to start.
I can go ahead and start. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I saw Malik. We'll go Malik and then Gerald.
Okay.
Get to go before the Jackson. That's all right. Well, when I think about escape, I think about what's pretty much the most accessible to us. And there's a list. There's a list of things, and I know that the Jacksons will expand on this list. But one of the most accessible things for us is food, and understanding that, and knowing that, yeah, they call it comfort food, but why do they call it comfort food? What is so important about food when it comes to escape? And understanding that there's a chemistry to it. So there are lots of things that you pointed out earlier, Kim, that we're addicted to. And I will say that there are reasons behind these addictions. There are food opiates, and that's something that was discovered a long time ago. And lots of chemical responses, especially to processed foods. So foods that are processed are not processed just because it makes everybody's life easy. They're processed to keep you eating for a particular reason. So you have food opiates, and some of the ones that are like heavily concentrated are like wheat and dairy, so that we understand that they're like opioid peptides in those things. And so there we have a range of foods that happen to be highly addictive. So not just things like dairy, but of course sugar, especially when we not just look at sugar, but when we start looking at, and more specifically, fructose. So we understand that the escapes can become very, very easy. You don't have to go and cop. You don't have to. you don't need a drug dealer. You can just go to your grocery store and understand that there are common food opiates, including in food that is very very healthy for us, but also in foods that are very unhealthy for us. And so that is probably, that in itself is probably that's a session unto itself. So some of the most addictive foods, there's a reason why pizza is so addictive. You have wheat, you have dairy, and you have a lot of sugar. And there's some foods that are high on that list. You have chocolate, you have chips and cookies, and there are reasons for that, including how they not only taste or the high salt content, but how they feel, how they crunch in our mouths, because we also have different types of energetic needs, as well as in terms of when we start thinking about the foods that are most or highly addictive to us, the ones that can kill us. There's a reason behind that, and again, that in itself is that's because there are many studies that back these claims up. That in itself are reasons why it's so easy to access food. But that's probably the easiest thing for us, even through this pandemic. I want to say Dr. G mentioned that the other day, where our weight is fluctuating in such a way, and it's doing it because we're going back to the comfort foods, to the things that help us escape.
And before we get to you, Dr. Gerald, if y'all are listening out there and you feel like, did Malik just front on me about my food? You're not alone, because I just want to be transparent about what I'm going to do after this panel's over. This is so terrible. I know, family. I'm trying my best. I'm going to get this information from Kenneth and see what happens. Dr. Gerald.
Well, I'll just piggyback a little bit off of Malik as well. I mean, food is our biggest addiction, in my opinion. I mean, working at a pharmacy, in a retail pharmacy, and I'm a floater, so I'm all over the place, right? So there aren't too many places in Ohio that I haven't seen food come in from patients picking up medication for diabetes. And again, this is by no means an attack, but we're picking up medication to treat the condition that's in our shopping cart, right? So, and you know, maybe that's a matter of education. Maybe that's just a matter of coping. Maybe it's a matter of just a combination of a lot of things. But I'm going to take it a different direction. So I do a lot of what's called Generation RX. So I'm spending a lot of time looking at data as it relates to kids and opiate addiction, alcohol abuse, smoking, you name it. And one of the, and even when it comes to adults, a lot of things that I'm dispensing, depending on the location, some areas more than others, is a drug called Suboxone, which is buprenorphine. And for anyone that doesn't know those drugs, it's basically for someone who's trying to get off of an addiction for heroin or an opiate. Opiate meaning something like Percocet or hydrocodone or anything like that, potentially that can cause a high level of sedation. So what does that all mean? So about 60 to 70% of most children, at least under the age of 18, the reason that they're taking an opiate, number one, it's easily accessible right now. You know, it's easy to get. It's in everyone's medicine cabinet because, you know, from really since about the late 80s till about now, we've had prescribers who unwillingly and some willingly really didn't understand the effects of opiates. So this is also not an indictment of prescribers as well. But the reality is this: those kids, when studied or when we were asked to do a survey, all said that it was really just a cope. Those kids didn't want to get high. They didn't want to get high. There's a completely different experience of wanting to get high versus coping with an opiate. And that's what most of those kids want to do. They simply want to cope with the day-to-day life and the peer pressure that they're experiencing as children now. You know, and I don't want to just attack one area, but I empathize with the folks, the kids of Chicago, who are, how are they able to cope now? What's their escape? You know, I mean, you're seeing violence all around you. Is there potentially some addiction to violence that you become aware of, or you're not aware of, and you're almost desensitized to it? You know, so what do we turn to? We turn to the most easily available thing potentially in that cabinet with mom and dad, and that's a drug like an opiate. Now, I will say this: the African American community numbers for opiate abuse is relatively slow. It's stagnant. You know, we were not seeing a lot of it, but it still exists, right? So that topic is very important. So, in my opinion, the reason a lot of people are self-medicating is because there's an easy access to opiates right now. Now, we are trending down the state. Governor DeWine has done an outstanding job of reducing the number of opiates that are being prescribed and dispensed. But I think that's really an area we need to target. As far as the adults are concerned, there again, the numbers you can extrapolate even from the children. Some of them do take those drugs to get high. Some of them have legitimate reasons, right? We're not here to condemn or attack anyone that's taking a pain medication, but many of those folks are taking that medication for a legitimate medical purpose. But some of them who are abusing it are taking it simply to cope with life. It's not necessarily to get high. Some are, but most are really just trying to take it to get high. So, you know, again, I think eating is also an issue we need to tackle. I mean, we eat our emotions. You know, some people argue that we're digging our grave with our teeth, right? You know, Les Brown is famous for making that statement in many of his speeches. We're digging our graves with our teeth. So between food and our opiate addiction, those are two things that are high on my list for how we self-medicate currently in our society.
Thank you, Dr. Gerald. Kenneth, especially with the kind of work that you do, you're getting folks who are like at that point where either they have decided, and you said these words, 3 such powerful words that I wanted to lift up in your own story. And I want to thank you for sharing your story and living it and then doing the work. You shared these 3 words: I need help, right? So you're getting people in that moment, and you're either getting them when they're asking for it, or in some cases, someone's saying, I love you, and you're not asking for it, but you need help, right? When you're treating folks, what do you see that they're addicted to? And I actually want to ask you this question to see if this is a thing. Are you seeing that people might have an addiction and then underneath it, there might be other addictions that they have? So like, you know, say I remember talking with a person and they were sharing that they didn't realize they had both kind of like an addiction that blended their drug use and their nicotine addiction and their sex addiction, and they used them all together, and so one triggered the other one, so it was hard to break from all of them because they were kind of happening together. Can you speak a little bit about what it looks like when they cluster?
Yes. So a lot of people come into treatment and, you know, they're just not happy. They never was happy for the most part. So they didn't feel loved, or some type of abuse happened, or trauma happened, or they just, for the kid, maybe at school they didn't fit in, or had some sort of culture shock, or could be anything. But the addictions I see is alcohol use disorder, cannabis use disorder, cocaine use disorder, stimulant use disorder, same thing, but maybe something different. Opiate use disorder. I mean, all those things are at the forefront of their addiction, but they also have underlying issues of the addiction, which kind of maybe brought the addiction on. So they're trying to escape these feelings, and they know that the drugs give them short-term relief. They know sex gives them short-term relief. Whatever they can get, a cigarette, marijuana, what they know it's going to give them relief, even though they know they may be harming their health. They just want to get out the feeling. So they're willing to take those consequences of how it's harming them in order to get some relief from the pain that they're feeling at that time in their life. So yes, there are sex addictions, gambling addictions, coupled with alcohol use disorder, stimulant use disorder, opiate use disorder, things like that. You rarely get people that will be honest about sex addiction, because they don't want to, feel embarrassed about it or whatever have you. But there have been some that just be brutally honest and say, yeah, I got a sex addiction. I was picking up prostitutes. I was doing this. I was doing that, and it just fuels the addiction. So whatever the case may be, I think it depends on what they have at that moment in that time. If they have money to get drugs or to buy sex, why do just one when I can do both of them? But I think the one of the underlying things is when people get high, it makes them want to feel something different or something more. So, okay, I'm drinking alcohol. Okay, I'm tired of that. That's not enough. Now I need something else. I want something else. So let me go down here and see who got some cocaine. You get the cocaine revs their feelings up to where they want sex. They want that feeling of sex. So now I'm looking for sex. So I'm intertwining all those chemicals, and the endorphins are popping and everything. So I kind of want it all, as opposed to one over the other. When I get one, I want the other one. When I get the other one, I want the other one. So why not just get them all at the same time if I can? And it's just kind of like a vicious cycle, until they kind of get treatment and start to come out of that, start to heal.
Oh man, so you just opened up this little can of worms that I cannot wait. We're going to jump into that in a little bit. One of the things that I was thinking about as you were saying that is access and addiction, the relationship. Never really thought about that before, but like, what do I have access to? And how sometimes it might be that whatever I have access to might inform what I get addicted to. Never thought about that. And then also I'm thinking about whatever might be underneath that. Like, could it be that some people are addicted to love and they're searching for this thing, or they're addicted to companionship, or they're addicted to, so yeah, this is food for thought. We're going to unpack that some more in a little bit. I want us to talk about coping. And so we kind of use this word when we're talking about the early part of, well, I want to cope with this thing, or I want to cope with that thing. We talk about coping strategies. And so whoever wants to respond to this, I want to kind of pull in Malik on some of this, and then whoever else would like to respond about what our options. And I guess maybe and this honestly, whoever would like to respond, but I do want to hear about alternative methods to it and what all do we feel like we have at our disposal. Because when I'm listening to what you said, Kenneth, it sounds like a lot of, if I juxtapose what you're talking about, this begets this and this begets that. But some of the things that Malik shows us in somatic practices, we have all the time at our disposal as a coping strategy. And we never thought about it. We never thought about our breath as a coping strategy, movement, running as a coping strategy, eating different as a coping strategy, which those things still also might be accessible to us. But I want to back up a little bit regarding this word, some of the words we use. Can y'all walk us through who is paying attention to us, who's listening to us on our Facebook, in our Facebook family, our YouTube family, the wording, like, what is the difference between a coping strategy versus if this gets to be too much? Like, how can I tell if this is just a couple times that I smoke weed or a couple times that I drink or I just like to have sex? When then it becomes a problem, you know, when does it go from a coping strategy to self-medicating? What's the difference between the two? What is misuse versus abuse? When is it addiction? When is it happening? Because I can tell you from friends that I've had over the decades, none of them would ever say that they were addicted to anything, maybe until they're actually in recovery. So help break down how we're using these words and why the words matter. Whoever would like to start with that.
I'll go ahead and start just because I'm going to go ahead and get the elephant in the room out of the way. So, you know, I'm a pharmacist, so obviously, you know, I understand drugs very well, but I'm going to say this. It should be the last resort, you know, as a coping mechanism. You know, it should be a relationship between you and a doctor that decides on whatever issue you may be dealing with. Maybe it's depression, maybe it's diabetes, maybe it's a heart condition. You know, this is a decision. This is issues that you should talk with with a trained, licensed medical provider. So with that said, you know, we're talking a little about coping and misuse and abuse. I really love those two terms, by the way, Kim. I think that's very important that we decide that that's the way we're going to classify this, because I know a lot of folks who are out there selling medications to friends, and that's would be considered a level of misuse by that individual. I know a lot of folks, and we're not even going to go into the opiate epidemic, but a lot of drugs that are abused are sleeping medications. So a lot of folks can't sleep. And granted, if you don't get any sleep, that affects your quality of life through potentially your entire day. And once it becomes a chronic condition, it's going to affect your mood, and you're losing a lot of happiness and not necessarily able to figure out why. So you turn to someone, maybe it's not a healthcare professional, that is going to find something for you to help you sleep. So a misuse would be going to a friend asking for a potential drug like an Ambien. That would be a potential misuse. That would not be something that you would casually want to do. You know, misuse and abuse of that would be someone who's got an issue with insomnia, that for whatever reason they aren't able to get to sleep, and they find themselves taking maybe more 1, 2, or 3 potential tablets at night to get to sleep, versus the one that's prescribed and maybe potentially not addressing the real underlying issue is that you got a lot of stress going on in your life, and that's what's affecting your ability to sleep. Not that you need a second or third Ambien to help you sleep, because you know you're unable to cope or not necessarily able to figure out what the root cause to the issue of sleeping is from the very beginning. So I really like the use of misuse and abuse. Hopefully I clarified that, but for anyone that wants to maybe talk with me after the call, we can talk a little bit more about misuse and abuse, because that's a really big deal, especially in the world of pharmacy.
Thank you for that. Kenneth, anything to that? And then we'll go to Malik.
Yes, I think that piggyback off what Dr. G said, I think also that the misuse part and the abuse part, we can look at prescribed medications versus not prescribed medications. So somebody who may be taking whatever it is, Ambien or sleeping medication, or you know, to that effect, if they don't have a prescription for it, then they're misusing it. Now, somebody on the other hand who has a prescription for it and it's just taking too much of it, they're not taking their you know, as prescribed, then they're abusing it. But to talk more of the other things, you know, people, self-medication and coping skills. Self-medication is a coping skill. So there's really no difference. It's coping.
When does it turn?
How the people are coping, and it's whether you're coping in a healthy way or an unhealthy way.
And when does it turn into addiction?
It turns into addiction when people start taking larger amounts over a longer period of time than what was intended. So if I tend to just take 2 of these so I can sleep better at night and then it turns into 4, 5, 6, now it's becoming a problem. And I may be potentially, with a use disorder.
Absolutely. Yes. Malik, I have so many thoughts, but I want to make sure I get to your voice, Malik.
Well, what I will say or add to that, and Dr. G, he mentioned something that's really, really important. It's kind of difficult to even talk to people from the community, people from my family, even for a while, just to talk myself into therapy, because a lot of us believe that it's going to take us down the road to drugs. It's going to, they're going to prescribe us something, and that's going to be something that so we know that besides the cost and the side effects, many people just don't want to go on antidepressants. Psych patients, they're notoriously uncompliant, because I have some of those folks in my own family and in my own communities, and working in the public with recreation and parks for 26 years and seeing a lot of the homeless populations. A lot of them are dealing with mental health issues. And unfortunately, as we know, and I won't soapbox it, that has been criminalized, as opposed to helping those folks with mental health issues, become well, to heal. So a lot of them don't want to take their meds for various reasons. And the chief thing among those are the side effects. So if we start thinking about getting better, it's horrible to say, hey, I'm going to get better, but here's the side effects. We all have had jokes every time a big farm company would have one of those beautiful commercials with like old people on a beach. No knock to old people, check my gray. But with old people on the beach, and they're having all this great time, and then it'll go side effects include, and then you have this long laundry list of things that go down the screen, including death. So there's a lot of reasons why we tend to believe that we don't want to use drugs, not knowing that chemically, quite often, even though Dr. G said that's something to avoid, it's still on the list. It may be on the list as a last resort, but that doesn't mean it doesn't make the list. Sometimes those side effects are better than, let's just say, death, or just not being able to cope at all. So when I think about it in a million ways, but as a mind-body practitioner, the first thing that I'm thinking about is, again, what's easily accessible. I'm also thinking about, so I know a lot of smokers. I'm surrounded by smokers. I've been surrounded by smokers my whole life. But when they are trained and when they understand that there are so many practices of just breath work. So before I get into the mindfulness aspect of it and how beautiful it is and how it's easy to access, very, very simply. And sometimes, even when we have a hard time accessing it, even if we have someone speak to us, which is why we started the practice today, why we started this session today, this town hall, we started it with guided meditation. Sometimes you can't talk yourself down. Sometimes you can't count yourself down. So it's nice sometimes when you have someone that can guide you. But there are so many ways that we can find and embrace a practice that doesn't take too much out of us to do.
Such as, I was thinking, I don't know, you got something for us? Because, hey, friends out there, we're about to do something really cool in a second. Before we do that, do you have something that we could? So I'm thinking about coping strategies. I'm going back to something that Kenneth said in the beginning about what's right there, So if sometimes the coping strategy is maybe something that's not quite healthy, that's right there. But we also have some good stuff that might be right there that we can use to be helpful. Can you show us something really quickly that we could do?
Absolutely. And I'm going to step away from this camera. But hopefully I'll be in a space where you can still see me.
Okay.
Movement has rescued me for all of my life. And if I was not able to have some somatic practices that I was, unaware were somatic practices, stretching and just being intentional in your movement. They're vital components. They're vital components of mental health as well as physical fitness. And those two things, they go together, and it encompasses all things. So many times, especially now, I'm seeing a lot of our folks. Actually, and I think it's the most beautiful thing, but I'm seeing our folks becoming entrepreneurs, but I'm also seeing them working until they have all of these sources of aches and injuries and unhealthy habits. And some of those habits are just built up at the desk, and they're built up at the desk between our neck and our shoulder, and carpal tunnel, our lower back, and even obesity in our lower gut. So all those things I'm thinking about, and Bessel van der Kolk mentioned it when he said the body keeps the score. You know, that's also not just being so busy, but also where we hold stress in our bodies. So we need to make sure that we can alleviate some of the pain in our bodies, try to do more to correct our posture. I'll be the first to say mine isn't great, but it also increases mobility and improves our health and well-being, because there are a lot of social ills out there. There are things that are killing us, but some of the worst things that are killing us really is just sedentary lifestyles, not moving, just the lack of movement, and plain old table salt, y'all. So I just want to say to you that you can, there are a lot of things that you can do. One thing that you can do, and I'm going to hope that you can all see me. Yell at me if you can't. One thing that you can do is just have a chair handy. So when you have a chair handy, take a moment and think about chair yoga or office yoga. So when you think about these things, where do we hold the stress? So think about what we could do. We want to think about neck stress. So we take and bring our chin, take it over your right shoulder. Don't move those shoulders up and down. Stress that neck. Stretch it out. Take that gaze over the left shoulder, just until you feel the stretch. And you want to do these things for just a few breaths. Bring it back forward. Everything becomes neutral. You can take your right hand, bring it over your head, grab your left ear, and gently just take it so you can feel that stretch in the side of your left neck, left side of your neck. Again, you want to hold that there for a few breaths. Take that left hand, reach over top of your head, reach for your right ear, pulling gently just to the left side. Certain things that you want to think about doing even when you wake up in the morning. But you inhale, bring those shoulders up. You exhale, roll them back. And then you go in reverse. Inhale, bringing them back up from the rear. Exhale, take them to the front. But you just roll those shoulders, and you relieve and release a lot of the stretch. Take your hands. You can slide ever so, even towards the middle of your chair like this. Bring your hands to your knees. And so when you think about things like, hey, I don't want to be on the mat, or I can't get on the mat, you can cat and cow from your chair. So when you inhale, you press your chest forward, you lift your gaze, you draw your shoulders back as if you're trying to make your clavicles kiss. Take your gaze up as if you're trying to look at where the wall meets the ceiling. And then you want to exhale. Roll out, rounding out your spine, taking your gaze down to your toes. And you can inhale, exhale, just like so. Just like so. And the spine, it holds a lot of stress, a lot of pressure. So just sitting forward without a lot of to do, you can bring your left hand either to your right knee or to the right side of the chair, bringing both hands with you. When you twist and sit tall, you can stay exactly where you are as if you're trying to look over your right shoulder, or you can reach behind the back of the chair and twist even deeper. And you want to hold that for a few breaths as well. And what you do on one side, you want to do on the other side. And if the back of your chair is too high, like it's an office desk, again, come to the side here, taking your right hand, bringing it to your left knee, or maybe you have arms on your chair. Side bends. You inhale, you can lift up, you can bring those hands together, and slowly, keeping your feet and your bottom planted, lean, just bending over, keeping your midline and protecting your spine. Inhale and coming up, and then you want to go to both sides. Do that for a few breaths on both sides. Exhale, release those hands. You don't have to do anything special on your mat. However, you can do pigeon. So think of a figure 4. So I'm going to stand so that you can see. So think of a figure 4 where, let's say, you would bring your right ankle above your left knee. So this is what it looks like standing. And this is what it looks like if you're seated. Here. And for some of us, this is plenty. This is plenty in terms of a stretch. Opening up the hips is important. You can take, exhale and lean forward. And just hold for a few breaths. And come right back up. You want to go to both sides. Same thing. Sit up nice and tall. Lift the crown towards the ceiling. You can inhale and exhale there, or inhale and exhale and fold over. And you want to hold that there for a few breaths until you feel it. It opens up everything in them thighs as well. So I'll turn to the side so that you can see a forward fold. So you bring those hands behind you, you clasp them. And as you bring those hands behind you and clasp, inhale and lift up. As you do so, make sure that wherever you are, you're comfortably seated, depending upon the chair you have, especially if it has wheels. You want to slide midway, closer to the edge, because you want to also think about this right here is plenty for a lot of us. And then, of course, you can also forward fold as you exhale down. As you rise and come back up. You want to make sure you get as much circulation going as you can. Inhaling both arms out, teeing them out. And take your gaze over the right, looking straight down that right arm, past the 3 middle fingers. So it's a seated warrior 2. Then you take that gaze, keeping those arms straight out. You can hold this for several breaths, but looking down that left arm, down those 3 middle fingers, taking your gaze back forward, just making sure you get as many breaths in as possible. And just for as much as you can, getting circulation movement. I'll show you one more movement. So this is called a seated eagle. So with the seated eagle, let's say you center your right foot. You can bring that left foot over, right? Or you can bring it all the way up top. And bringing it up once is good. Or you can make it twist all the way back and down. Here. So if that left leg is over the right, that left arm, bring it under and hold those arms up here. Or again, you can bring it all the way around once or twice. Inhale and lift and stay, or exhale and fold over. Wherever you are, as you unbound, do everything that you'll do on one side, do it on the other. So you take that right leg, put it over the left. That right arm, put it under the left. 1 time or 2 times. Always the yogi's choice, lifting those arms up, lifting your spine, staying there, or folding over. And just finding a way, for as many ways, to find your own practice that makes the most sense to you. And that is just a brief idea of what it looks like to do, let's say, some office yoga that may not take no more than 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Malik. All right, so we are going to welcome, we're going to transition. We're going to do something a little bit different, similar to what we did last week, but we want to bring in some folks who might have some stories for us about some of their relationships to this topic. Remember, today we are talking about self-medicating. We're talking about coping strategies, what we do. Is it working for us? Is it not working for us? So I'm not sure if we have one of our first stories. Do we have Wesley or Gerard with us?
I'm here.
Yay! So we're going to start with Wesley's story. Wesley, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you
Please,
for having me.
we're so glad you're here, sir. And please, if you could share with us, we're in Facebook and YouTube land with our friends out there. Please, if you could share with us your story, your relationship to this topic. We are all ears and we are happy to be gracious listeners.
Thank you, Kim, for having me here. It's a pleasure being a part of this discussion. I want to first say, and I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that on the 14th of August, I'm celebrating 26 years of uninterrupted sobriety. Now,
and I feel like I have to interrupt you so that I can mention this. I don't know if y'all heard that. Friends, 26 years of sobriety. I'm gonna get out your way, sir. I feel like I'm pulling a Kanye and a Taylor. Like, I'm gonna let you finish. But he said 26 years of sobriety, family. So first of all, that's a huge congrats. Please tell us your story. And when you do, tell us how you were able to maintain that 26 years. I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna let you finish. Look, I'm putting on mute so you can't even hear me.
Well, I guess the first thing I owe this sobriety to is the God that I understand. That's the first and foremost. So I want to acknowledge that publicly, that without him, nothing is possible. So that's where it's begun, and that's where it ends for me with him. So I'm going to try to condense this, like I said, in the 5 minutes for 26 years. But I guess the topic, I want to kind of talk a little bit about the coping skills and how I cope through my addiction, basically, and why I use drugs. I guess the main reason, as hearing you guys discuss this, for me, and this is just for me, was basically because I didn't want to deal with this thing called life. I had no coping skills. I had no social skills. I was 29 years old. I lived in my mother's basement. I had no job. I had no car. All I knew was to get high. Okay. And I mean, I heard the discussion earlier about different ways that people cope with different addictions: food, sex, alcohol, drugs. To me, it's all the same. Addiction is an addiction, and whatever there was in front of me is what I use and abused. So the preference, and I'll say preference because this is one thing that brought me to my knees, was the crack cocaine, and I was in the era of the crack cocaine, the late 80s, early 90s. When it first hit the United States. And I remember specifically watching Dan Rather on CBS Evening News talking about crack cocaine and saying that this is something that it's a pandemic and it's hit the United States. And if you take it and use it, you're instantly addicted. You know, you're hooked instantly, you know. So me being a rebel that I am, I want to try it because it's not going to get me. Oh, no, I'm better than this. I can do this. I've been drinking and smoking weed for years. So this thing is not going to beat me. So that's what I did. I experimented, and 11 and a half years later, I was on a tailspin. And that's how I coped for 11 years. I coped with the use and abuse of crack cocaine and alcohol and marijuana and opiates and whatever else was in front of me. It wasn't really a preference for me. It was just me getting out of me. I didn't want to deal with the fact that I was 30 years old in my mother's basement. I didn't have transportation. I didn't have a job. I was nowhere that I needed to be at 30 years old. When I look at my colleagues and I look at people I went to school with and how successful they were, it hurt. I remember the last time I got arrested, one of my sophomore classmates was a deputy down in the sheriff's department downtown, and he handcuffed me, and it brought me to tears. It just brought me to tears because I wanted to be where he was. I mean, not so much in the jail, but where he was doing. I mean, he had a family, he had a home, he had children. He was living his life, and I knew nothing about that. That was not an interest for me. So the way I cope was just to get out of myself, get out of my head, stop thinking about life, and medicate, self-medicate as much as I could, to the point where my behavior was just out of control. I mean, it became so bad for me as far as using that I was actually in my mother's house underneath her nose, and she had no clue, and I won't go into some of the things that I did because we don't need to hear that, but it wasn't a pleasant ride for me at all. But I will say this, and this was asked to me the other day. I was asked if I could repeat this behavior, if I can go back and hit the reset button, would I change a thing? My answer was no. I would not change a thing, because it makes me the man I am today. And it also gives me a chance to do this, share with other people who may be struggling with addiction or don't know how to cope but with the alcohol, waking up drinking, going to bed drinking, that type of deal. I want to be able to share my story, my message, because that's how I got here. I got here based on people around me who loved me unconditionally, who told me that my behavior needed to change, and if I don't do this, I was to die. And I believe that. I started to believe that. So I grabbed a lot of people. I was a big AA thumper. I don't have a problem with mentioning that, because the fellowship, Alcoholics Anonymous, saved my life. It really did save my life. It taught me how to cope without alcohol and drugs. It taught me how to cope without doing destructive behavior. It taught me how to live my life, and I'm very, very grateful for that. So I try to give it back as much as I possibly can, because I know it's essential, and especially right now in this pandemic, where you really can't go to a physical AA meeting like you used to. You have to do this on Zoom, and it's not as personal as you want it to be, but it does help, but I was fortunate enough to be able to sit around a circle and the coffee and the cigarette smoking. I mean, the whole gamut. And I tell you something, that changed my life. It really did change my life, and I'm grateful for that. And I would encourage anybody who's struggling with this addiction to clap onto somebody who has been there. Now, I also work in the field, so that gives me kind of a double-edged sword, professionally and personally, to be able to share where I'm at, and I'm grateful for that.
Before you stop, because you said so many things, and I'm like, oh, but that. So I know I'm like, well, a little bit of time. But you said something, and I want to make sure that I create some space for this. I can't help but notice that one of the things you said was, oh, I was just drinking and smoking, and they mentioned this thing, but like, I'll never get addicted.
Right. Well, that's the uniqueness of it.
And then you're like, 11 years later. Share a little more about that if you could, and just indulge me in that. Share with me that.
A drug addict is a very unique individual. Okay, things happen to us that don't happen to normal people. So we kind of are a little bit standoffish as far as how life goes, right? So I'm a very unique individual. Things that happen to you won't happen to me. This is my attitude. This is my thinking, right? So I've done enough drugs in my life to know what do I need to do versus what I can't do. Okay, I wasn't a huge drinker, right? I drank for the effect, but I didn't wake up to it, and I didn't go to bed to it. My claim to fame was crack cocaine. Now, I did wake up to that and go to bed to that. You know what I mean? But the fact that I thought, let me be clear, I thought I knew my boundaries, I was sadly mistaken. But that's what my head was telling me, that I'm unique, that it's not going to get me. I'm not going to end up like my uncle was. I'm not going to end up like my aunt. I do this, I do that, but I know how to control it. And I really, truly believe that.
I want to do something here. So a couple things. One is, we had a question, and And actually, let's do this. Let's bring our panelists on, because I want to just have a quick conversation with them before we lose you, Wesley. Don't go anywhere yet. Right?
I'm right here.
And
I'm
Kenny,
not
if
going
you're
anywhere.
there too, if we got Kenneth Jackson, you said something, and I want to speak to this, and then I also want to just give any kind of exchange if our panelists also would have anything that they'd like to talk with you with while we still have you here. But you said something about, my body is going to function a little bit different. My head's going to function a little bit different. And one of the things that intrigues me about this is I think we have folks out there who don't know if their body's been designed to have addictions or not.
Absolutely.
And you don't know till you know. I know one of the conversations I've had with my children is genetically you have this on both sides of your family.
Yeah.
You don't know if your first drink is going to be your 12th drink or not, right? And so you got to approach this a little bit differently because we don't know, but we know it's in the family. And so I'd be interested in any perspective on that. Obviously yours, Wesley, and then from our panelists, thoughts about this. And we got this really dope individual, y'all, 26 years of sobriety. And I'm sure that in some way he's probably, interacted with folks in your professions this whole time. Would love to just really quick thoughts before we get to our next testimonial that we want to lift up. Any quick ones?
Can't hear Malik. He's saying something. Can't hear him though. There you go. You mute. Look at your mute, Malik.
Can you hear me now?
There you go. Yes, sir. That's better.
Sorry about that. Sorry, Elizabeth. I just want to say, Wesley, congratulations. I think that's incredible, brother. I'm like so proud of you.
Thank you.
I have two brothers, and one of them, they're probably now in their 20th year of sobriety. So it just made me think of that. I wanted to say congratulations. Also, just touch on with something else you said earlier. One thing that kind of kept me doing other things is when I looked at my father, I was afraid, and I knew that there was addiction on both sides of the family. I was afraid that it would be me. So only by the grace of God, but I am you, Wesley, and you are because I am, and I am because you are. Congratulations,
Absolutely.
brother.
Thank you, man. Thank you. And this is a genetic disease. I saw a picture of two of my aunts back in the 70s, and they were both drunk in this picture. And I blame them for my addiction. I said, this is why I am the way I am, because of my aunts here, genetically speaking. So that is a very true statement. This is definitely something that can run in a family. And the cycle has to be broken. It has to stop.
Hey, Wesley, this is Dr. Jackson.
I was going to say, the Jackson brothers, I don't know if you had a quick thought before we move to our next testimonial.
Yeah, just real quick, Wesley, just because I am a pharmacist and I'm intrigued by just hearing your story. How do you feel like medication helped you throughout your journey? Did you ever feel like it didn't help you? It was hindering you? It helped you break through? Give me just a real quick take on what you think about medication and where you are right now.
When I first got sober, I didn't believe in medication. I just didn't have a belief in it. And I knew that I suffered from some depression. So I did visit my family physician, and he gave me a very soft, I can't even think of what it was here. I can't remember what it was, but it was a very soft pill for depression, and it did help. Now, that's my experience. Things have changed since then. This was 20 years ago, of course. We have so many different medications now, but I think, doctor, the most important thing is that we're diagnosed properly. You mentioned mental health earlier, and if we're not diagnosed properly, the medicine's not going to help. And if we're taking the medicine with alcohol, that makes the things worse. And I know a lot of individuals who do take medicine and will drink a beer behind it, thinking that beer is going to give that effect that they need, that boost they'll need. And that's one of the worst combinations you can ever do, is mix medicine with alcohol. I knew that. I think it's essential, especially with the opiate piece. I think the alternative medication that a lot of opiates take is helpful. People say it's substitute one drug for the next, but I don't believe that, because eventually you wean yourself off of that opiate, and that drug helps you do that. The methadone and all the other ones, that they help you wean yourself off that. opiate. Because if you don't do it properly, you can die. You know that, Doc. I mean, it's not safe to detox yourself off of any opiate. You have to have a medical doctor to assist you, or you could literally die.
Thank you, Wesley. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Kenneth, I didn't know if you had a word before we transition to our next testimonial.
Yes, congratulations, Wesley. That is a real thing. 26 years, man. I commend you, for the 26 years, and congratulations.
Thank you.
With everything you have going on, your professional career and everything. Like you said, a lot of people can be just curious, or they may have resentments, or entitlement issues, abandonment issues, whatever's going on. Some people are just rebellious. You tell them, don't do this, or this is not good for you. That's telling them, okay, I'm going to do it. But that's good. How you've come through the years, 26 years. And man, I commend you.
Thank you, sir.
Congratulations again.
It has been. And real quick, before I sign off here, one of the things that I realized about my addiction that had to change was my behavior. My behavior was probably the worst driving force that I had. The things I did, the way I treated people, the way I responded to people, that drove my addiction. So if I didn't change my behavior when I got sober, what is the use? We call that a dry drunk, someone who just stopped using alcohol and drug but doesn't change their behavior. Now, you have to change the way you think to be sober. And that's what the word sobriety means, changing your thinking.
Thank you so much. So glad that we had you on here. And listen, Wesley, we'll be in touch.
I'm sure we will.
Thank you so much. All right, Margot, I want to give a shout out to Margot working behind the scenes, making things amazing for us here on this town hall. Margot, if Gerald, not Gerald, we got Gerald right here. Gerard. Hey, Gerard.
Hey.
So Gerard, listen, he is a person who I've been working with in so many different capacities. And y'all need to know, like, when we think about future leaders, we think about people who are in community and carrying around the heaviness. Like when we think about helpers, right? Those of us who are Black helpers of all ages, there's a weight that comes with that. And a lot of us have come into the space of helping because we had stories and we have stuff of our own. And so I asked Gerard to come and share his story, just a different perspective as it relates to this topic of self-medicating. And so, Gerard, go ahead and get us started. I'm going to stay on here with you because I feel like I want to be in conversation with you. I'm going to be good. I'm going to try to behave. But talk to us a little bit about, for those of us, listen, we've got some folks who are listening out there in the Facebook world, YouTube world, who are like, listen, I smoke and I'm fine with it. And I can tell you some of my friends over the weekend are like, listen, I got a card. I carry it. I'm good. Talk to us a little bit about those who are like, so this is my plant-based life, but it's a little bit different than yours. Talk to us about that. What's your story?
Yeah, thank you, first of all, for having me. I have to say, first of all, congrats to Wesley. And I know it's going to be hard to follow that. I don't know how to follow 26 years of sobriety, and I'm just a pothead. So I'm going to tell you how I'm a functioning pothead and basically how I got to this point. Well, I realized early that I had an addictive personality, since a child. I think it's most like probably Black American children addicted to like sugar, TV, stuff like that. So then, growing up, you try to find different outlets and things like that. And, usually at some point, probably in your early teenage years, you come across marijuana. So, and I've been smoking pretty consistently since then, taking breaks here and there and different things. But for a person like me, who I was already had a lot of anxiety and internal dialogue heavy and stuff like that, well, smoking, it sometimes it ramps that up, and then I have to deal with that. And it's a kind of a funny, adverse thing when it's like, Because sometimes it does, deject me, and sometimes it may hype me up. I use it for different reasons. Sometimes I use it to focus. Sometimes I use it to become dejected from certain situations. I use it to get hype and stuff like that. I use it to relax and wind down after work and stuff like that. I use it to get in the mood. All sorts of reasons. So there's different reasons why I do use it. So and it's just kind of one of those things. And people say gateway drug and stuff like that, but in a lot of ways, it kept me away from a lot of the heavier drugs, especially become kind of popular in my age group and stuff like that. A lot of pill popping and different things. And it's just like, yeah, I'm kind of good on that. I just stick with my weed smoke, and I'm grateful that I didn't experiment as, younger, because it was just like, yeah, why don't we go get some coke and put it in our blunt? And it was just like, yeah, no, let's not do that, and, the most I've ever can say, like, some shrooms or stuff like that, maybe Adderall and just that little stuff like that, alcohol, but nothing more than like marijuana. Is just like kind of, and again, I use it for different reasons. I use it to feel a sense of solitude after a long day and just to get away. And then I also use it for communion and fellowship with a lot of people. And that's how I get to relate to a lot of people in a way that it seems less awkward than if it's just like, hey, let's meet up and speak. It's like, well, okay, well, let's meet up and speak and smoke. And like, oh yeah, yeah. So it is that sort of thing that the lifestyle of it is almost all encompassing, and you take the good and the bad, because it's often an expensive, inconvenient habit. Honestly, that's another bill. And even when I say, hey, it's my medicine costs money. So stuff like that, and different, depending if you got, how you smoke, blunts or glass, you got to clean and maintain your bowls and your bongs and stuff like that. So it's another more so responsibility and in a chore in a sense when it becomes this habit, and depending chemically. And but different coping mechanisms I've learned now, definitely with the help of the BCAS, you guys and the support groups, learn different breathing techniques and centering and balancing. That's what I've been learning. And that's been helping a lot in different situations. So that's what I've been using going forward. And I have to thank Malik today, because that was really good. There's some good stuff today. So that's just some of the stuff that I've been employing, and just focusing on still. It's an everyday struggle and challenge, of course, but try to stay focused on it. But it's funny, because the old coping mechanisms I used to use, I think as a child, is we used to hide. I used to hide. I don't know if you guys used to do stuff like that, but I used to go hide when I got upset. And threaten to run away and stuff like that. So, and it's funny because sometimes when I smoke, I feel like I get kind of hide in my mind, and I get in my thoughts, and it's just like, whether I'm alone or with people, it's just like, yeah, I kind of got my internal dialogue, and I can hide. So it's funny, I just kind of put that together with the thinking about the old coping mechanisms. So yeah, it's just one of those things.
I have to ask you before we bring in the experts. What happened? So I'm curious about before you found marijuana, what did you do? How did you cope? Was there anything that worked before marijuana? And then here's the other thing. One of the things that came up, and I want to shout out Mark for bringing this up in our Facebook community, about like, for those who might be affiliated with someone who might smoke or use or whatever their coping strategy might be, what happens if then you decided, I think I'm going to stop smoking, but you have all these communities, these friend communities, these people who you care about, who were the people you smoke with. What happens regarding relationship fellowship when that's tied into the personal connections with, particularly if you're dating somebody, you know, like let's say you decide I'm going to be sober. What happens, you know, regarding relationships when one does and one does not? Any thoughts on that, what you did before or after, before we bring in the peoples to also, you know, join in our combo? Make sure you come off mute.
Oh, talking to me. I'm sorry, I was reading the comments. Of course, you're talking to me. I really got caught up reading the comments. Hey, Amber. This is see everybody. So, excuse me. But yeah, the coping mechanisms I used to use, like I said, probably just hiding and threatening to run away, stuff like that, and escapism of TV and things like that. That's all I knew as a young kid, really, pretty much, you know. Different tantrums and being angry and stuff like that. A lot of anger I'm still working through, and learning that it comes from a place of sadness and things like that. So those are some of the old mechanisms that I had in a way. A lot of overeating. I used to be a lot of overweight as a kid, and sweets, like I said, just sugar and TV, which I think is just like escapism, which, you know, some may compare the marijuana use to escapism, and sometimes it is, but yeah, it just seems like a thing is just so accepted now, and it just became so pervasive, and like I said, a culture and a lifestyle.
Sure. And I really use this as a moment to bring in Malik, Kenneth, Gerald. If you're back there in StreamYard world and you're not eating vegetables, doing chair yoga, or cooking racks of ribs, if we have Kenneth, if we have Malik, I want to bring you back into this for a second while we have Gerard with us. Where are our peoples? We've lost our peoples. There we go. Hey, friends, while we're all together, we have this a question, and I want to shout out again, Mark, for all of us in thinking about this. And we're kind of borrowing Gerard for this. Gerard, thank you for your story. Thank you for your story, family. And thank you for your honesty and for your authenticity in talking about the process. Panelists, I didn't know if you had any quick thought about Gerard's story. And again, shout out to Gerard. There's a lot of people would be like, yeah, this is where I am. But I think it's so important, again, in just Gerard's story is a lot of people's stories. So how do we meet folks where they are and just honor this is where you are? This is the detail of your story. There's history, there's context to it, that part. So first I want to do that. And then I also want us to get to the question that was lifted up by Mark. Thank you, Mark. We see you out there about what happens when you're dating someone who uses and you don't. How do you navigate that? What happens with that? Short term, long term? What are we looking at? Panelists?
I had one real quick question for Jared. I mean, and it's just, you know, I guess maybe a little selfish here, but this is very important to me because I got your raw and kind of unmuted way of discussing how you're feeling and how you're coping with everything. But let me ask you this. You know, I'm a pharmacist by trade, so I understand sobriety from a medication perspective, and I understand sobriety from, you know, someone who doesn't use marijuana versus someone who does. So let me ask you this now, and I've gotten a lot of mixed opinions on this before, but since I got you, I'm hoping that I can ask this question and maybe it helps someone else. Clarity is important to me, right, Gerard? Like, I want to feel like I can see everything, right? I want my mind to be clear. I've gotten different responses to this. Do you feel like your clarity is more clear when you smoke weed, or do you feel like it's less clear when you smoke weed?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I honestly think it depends on your mood or personality. Because, like I said, it's so all encompassing, and just I don't know if I'm just used to using it for whatever, but in a sense, it can be both in a sense because I use it to focus often. Like, okay, let me sit down and do this. Let me I have to get this done, and I know I can't go anywhere, and it's just one of those things. I'm used to go into some customer service positions and meet those mundane stats and stuff like that, but I would be focused knowing I had that one job to do and I could focus on it. And maybe things around me weren't as clear, but what I was focusing on, it was clear to me. So it depends. I think just how yeah, your mood, depending on how you take it and the personality of the individual.
One last question. One last thing.
Yes, sir.
I want to make sure though I make room for our other panelists, Kenneth and Malik, only because we are so short on time. We only have 17 minutes left, family. So I want to make sure, Kenneth, Malik, any thoughts that you wanted to contribute to the space?
Sure. Gerard, welcome, and such an intelligent brother too. I like the way you look at life. It's pretty dope. Pardon the pun.
Thank you.
So what I will say is that again in my family and being the son of Penny Brown, we always tend to embrace everybody and met everybody where they were, no matter where they were. So they had to put up with me for a long time. What I will say, two things. One, about that relationship. I know, when someone's using and someone isn't, quite often there's a codependent relationship that happens quite often with those things. Gerard, you mentioned something earlier. You said you, in your introduction, you was like, well, I'm just a pothead, but then you went on to talk about all these things that you're exploring. So I will go on to celebrate you for being more than just a pothead, for being a multifaceted individual who has done things like breath work. Breath work is incredible. Breath work is incredible. And I would go on to say, to couple those things, couple that breath work with meditation. There are about 7 forms that we know of, but there's so many ways that you can, continue to complete yourself in such a fashion and in such a way. But brother, I'm proud of you. Continue on your journey.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks so much, Malik. Kenneth, a word before we go to our final testimonial?
Yes. Thank you, Malik, for coming on, sharing your story, your honesty. My concern only is that if important social, occupational, or like recreational activities are reduced due to the use of marijuana, it might cause a problem long term. Not saying it is, but that's just my concern. If that's not happening with you, then that's fine. Also, there's a tolerance issue with all drugs. If you seem to be using more and more of the marijuana to get kind of the same effect, that might also be a problem. But if it's not, that's fine. It's just kind of like a question statement, so to speak.
Awesome. Thank you, Kenneth. Thank you, Gerard, again. You represent so many stories. Literally, just over the weekend, I was talking to some of my friends and we were having some of these same conversations and where they're like, I think I'm cool. Right now. So thank you so much for your honesty. I want to give a shout out to Gerard too. Gerard is, if we had a person who was like our ambassador of the support groups, it's this man right here. We talk about James Brown being the hardest working man in show business. Gerard is the hardest working man in support groups, getting folks help, affirming people, uplifting people, and saying like, there's no shame in trying to figure out how to get well. So Gerard, kudos to you. You are family to me, and I'm so grateful for you for sharing the story.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you so much, Gerard. I think we have our last testimonial, friends. So if we have Lisa Marie, hey, Lisa Marie. So Lisa is going to share her story, which I think is also going to be really unique for those who are listening out there, because Lisa represents the family member of, right? And she's got this different perspective on the family member of. I also want to give a shout out to Lisa, because for some people, especially we're talking about like coping strategies when we get stressed out and everything, they're like, stuff gets difficult and they're like, forget it. Let me go drink something. Let me go smoke or whatever they're going to do. Shout out to Lisa, because she worked really hard to get on this call here. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your story with us. So Lisa, what is your story being the relative of people who have addiction issues? Whichever way, however you want to tell the story.
Okay, I'll try to keep it short and sweet. I heard everybody, so y'all just couldn't hear me, but I heard everybody, and I appreciate everybody stepping forward and sharing. You can never learn enough. You can never hear enough. Nothing is ever too shocking. I'm glad it's a judgment-free zone. We can all be open about it. I think the part for me that was scary is knowing how bad it can get, because oftentimes when you are the child of an addict, you oftentimes pick up the top, your minimal tolerance is their highest. My father was a heavy drug user. He was abusing drugs at the age of like 11. And it started often, it often starts simple, marijuana, drinking, what have you. Before he was even in high school, he was mainlining IV use, heroin, and he did it for decades. And he was very open with me about it. I think the thing that I needed to know, he could not have been more candid with me, which was extremely important at that time of my life, because I think I was hitting a threshold moment where I could either go one way or the other. And what I think the thing that he wanted to stress was, be careful. This is hereditary addictions in our family, and wherever I stop, you start. He was very, very intelligent man, very simple man. He took him for his word. It was all around me. I didn't even know what it was. I had been offered it, didn't know what it was. Luckily, it was one of those, I'm good, I'm okay, it's whatever. In high school, I think my saving grace is, I had a wild period, experimental period. I got tired of being the good girl. I got tired of being, perfect grades, perfect attendance, crisp, and kept it tight. And I kind of wanted to, make my own image. And it was being the bad girl. I'm capable of being bad. I'm capable of being edgy or whatever. And I started to hang out with the shady crowd, and they were doing the drugs. I had no idea what they were. And it was through the grace of God, miracle, that I had a baby. It was the only reason. I think it was honestly God putting that child in my life, giving me a reason to live, giving me structure, giving me routine, because without it, I will probably be dead. Because the path I was on, I can honestly look back and say it was not good. If I didn't have anything to keep me in line or look forward to, it'd have been over a long time ago. I would have picked right up where he left off. I've had my moments and pushing things. Go ahead.
And can you share a little bit about how your dad's addiction may have impacted your life?
We're going downstairs sorry, we're moving. Going downstairs, my phone's about to die.
And it may have died. Uh-oh. Okay, I think we lost Lisa. Listen, family, we have 8 minutes left. Oh, and so we're going to actually bring on Elizabeth Joy. What I will say is this. Lisa, I know Lisa's story, and I think this is important to know. Though her dad was a lifetime drug user, heavy, heavy drug user, Lisa was miraculously born not addicted to drugs. And in the last moments of his life, the last years of his life, her dad actually was able to get clean off of his heavy drug use, and they were able to form relationship. So Lisa, I was just saying we're about to wrap up, but I wanted to share that your dad actually did end up having a relationship with you. It was a good end to the story, and I wanted to make sure that people know. And Lisa's an example of this, that not only is recovery possible, but even in the years that are lost through addiction, Lisa and her father's story, it is an example of how even when that time is lost, you can regain relationship. And they did have relationship, and they did have fellowship, and it ended up being a really beautiful, wonderful story. So Lisa, I wanted to thank you for making sure you came on to share it with us. Thanks, Elizabeth Joy. How are you wrapping us up? What do we have coming up?
Well, you know what? Before we go, I do want to jump in. First of all, thank you so much to our panelists as well as our guests for just sharing and being transparent. When you think about the stigma of mental health, of substance use and misuse, the more that we can share our truths and be honest about our journeys, the more we get closer, to breaking that stigma. So, and I know it's not easy to share that. And I think even for Gerard to come on behind someone who's 26 years uninterrupted sobriety, we celebrate. And that's not his story. And I think that I just appreciate that we can all be where we are and meet each other where we are. So I just want to first say thank you to that. And then I wanted to also circle back to this question about, dating someone. I actually had a very close dating relationship with someone who was highly successful as it relates to financially and career-wise, very intelligent man. But early into our relationship, I started realizing that something was going on there, right? And at the time, I had kind of shifted out of drinking being a normal thing or a regular thing, not so much in the form of addiction, but in the form of like hanging out, right? And then that quickly became something that I realized we were doing a lot. And so we just had this kind of crossroad where I realized he was actually what would be defined as a true addict or alcoholic. And I was more of a social drinker. And so just going through that experience, I know we don't have a lot of time to speak on it. I know Mark asked about it. But it's a very, very difficult journey because you love that person. You want to support them. When things are great, they're great. But when they're not great, they're not great. And thankfully in our relationship, because I'm actually a licensed drug and alcohol counselor, I was able to help him, kind of journey through and see his addiction. And so, we had a good ending, but I know many stories of folks who, it's really ravaged their relationship and their family. So suggestion out there to Mark is just, to be thoughtful and reach out for help, because sometimes we have to draw that line, unfortunately, as to when loving our partner and dealing with their addiction becomes so detrimental to ourselves and perhaps our family and our children that line has to be drawn. So we'll wrap up, we'll bring on our panelists for last one sentence call to action. We only have 4 minutes left. I know we're all passionate about these topics. Just really short thoughts on suggestions or call to actions that we can give to the audience as they think about how they process what we talked about today.
I'll go first. We got a lot of information tonight, just like we did last week. So a lot of what we take away from tonight is going to be how we process it. And, I'm an equation guy. I don't mind math, but, life a lot of times is just one big equation. And this is one that I'll leave with everyone tonight. That information is very, very important. However you focus on that information will become your personal reality. So the equation I'm leaving everyone is I equals information times focus. Whatever that information is and whatever you multiply it by as your focus, that will become your personal reality, whether that's good or bad.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. We'll just go over to the other Jackson, Kenneth Jackson. Any final thoughts?
Why not? Why not? Let's do it.
Yeah, I just want to say to all the individuals and families out there who are struggling with addiction or family members struggling with addiction, there are places that you can reach out for help. You know, we got a whole slew of community health centers, addiction treatment centers, addiction rehab centers here in Columbus, Ohio, and surrounding Ohio. So places like Mary Haven, Lighthouse, Woods at Parkside, Southeast Mental Health. I mean, we got a whole thing, Primary One Health. So don't be afraid to reach out, you know, and go get that help, because it might be what saves your life or your family member's life.
It might be what saves your life. Yes.
Thank you.
Malik Willoughby.
I'm sorry, Kim. Thank you, Mr. Jackson, number 2. Malik, thoughts?
I'm pretty sure you're number one, Kenneth. Number one in the hearts of so many. I will say that if we're looking at even the folks who came on and shared their stories, and the stories seemingly being so vastly different, but to not only one, meet our folks where they are, and two, which might be one, just to be kind to ourselves. It's really, really important to be kind to ourselves, but to get to know those people who are not only still on their path and their journey, and perhaps not even on a journey to ever seek sobriety, but to also seek understanding with those who feel like they can cope with this, but still have enough. And again, that's what's important. Just making sure people have enough resilient strategies, even if they're considering themselves a pothead, but able to say, I have these other modalities, which is really important, just to make sure that we're continuing to expose people to as many resilient strategies as possible.
Thank you so much, Malik. And again, thank you, Kim, for guiding this very helpful conversation. Dr. Jackson, Kenneth Jackson, thank you, Gerard. Thank you, Wesley. Thank you, Lisa. Again, I can't thank enough for your willingness to be transparent about your journey. This is how we break the stigma and get ourselves to well-being. Self-care is an act of resistance. We want to remind you all that the Black Community Ambassadors Program is here for you. We have support groups for Black helpers. They're all online. So we started thinking we were just going to serve Franklin County. We've had folks come through from Canada, from Wisconsin, Utah. I mean, it's just been beautiful to experience. So we welcome you to visit us on our Facebook page, on our website, blackcommunityambassadors.com. Join us in getting the support you need, especially Black helpers. We thank you for all the work that you do to support the community, but we want to remind you that while you're helping and loving on others, we need you to help and love on yourselves. We appreciate you coming out. We appreciate you leaning into these difficult conversations. And lastly, I just want to again thank Gerard. Gerard has been rocking with us. We have support groups three times a week. Gerard often comes to all of them. And when we first met him, he wasn't necessarily ready, right, for all that we were going to challenge him to do, but he has really leaned in, and we have seen what coming in, being transparent, leaning into support, we've seen what it will do. So we hope you will join us. Again, thank you. You all have a great evening. Be safe. Take care. Stay connected. We love you. We'll see you next time.